Welcome in, whiskey freaks, to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your #1 attitudinal bourbon destination. I'm John Stark, and I'll be bringing you candid and sometimes irreverent whiskey news, opinions, and reviews on the industry and the products they've been bringing us for hundreds of years. Now, if you're back today, you must be a glutton for punishment, or I'd like to think maybe you're a genius. Either way, I'm extremely glad to have you back, and I'm pretty excited for this episode. Today I explore how to make cheap bourbon taste expensive, and is this even a thing? Then I do a book review. Instead of a liquor lore segment this episode, you're going to get my thoughts on a book about whiskey. And not just any book. You'll thank me later. And I introduce you to the massive new Garrard County Distilling outfit in Lancaster, Kentucky. Now this is very close to my heart. I'm really excited about that. And lastly, I review Chris Stapleton's Traveler Whiskey. Ding, ding, ding! It's happy time, folks. Why is it happy time? Because I'm having a pour of Little Book Chapter 7 right now, and that always puts me in an amazing mood. There's a reason for my pour today, and I'll reveal that in just a bit. So here's the deal. Can you really make cheap whiskey taste expensive? If so, why would you even try to do that? Can this really be a thing? Now, I got to admit, this topic perplexes me, so that's why we're talking about it today. I say that because, you can find decent-ish whiskey for about $20. So why on earth would you try to buy some even cheaper whiskey and then try to jimmy rig it into tasting better? Well, evidently this is a thing, at least with some whiskey drinkers. You think these folks are from Arkansas? I'm just kidding. We Missouri folks always make fun of you guys, and I'm sure you do the same back to us Missouri folks. So it's just a joke. Relax. If not Arkansas, then these folks must be from the planet Pluto, right? And yes, Pluto is a planet. I don't care what that goofball Neil deGrasse Tyson says. Pluto will always be a planet. You ever see him talk about taking Pluto away? He looks almost gleeful. He even said, Pluto had it coming. Then with a twinkle in his eye, he voted to remove Pluto as a planet. He was an accessory to the crime of taking Pluto away. Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a tool. Okay, where was I? Oh yes, turning the water into wine, so to speak. So apparently there are enough of you whiskey freaks out there who are also thinking about this subject. So much so that the good folks at America's Test Kitchen experimented with this idea of making bad whiskey taste better. So here's what they did, and pardon me if I chuckle at any point. I promise I'm not making fun of you. They took several bottles of 4-year-old bourbon, costing about $15 each, and they used a bottle of, quote, good 12-year-old bourbon as a control. Now, there's no mention of what bourbon that was. Your guess is as good as mine. I guess it could have been Weller 12, maybe Knob Creek 12. I really don't know. They got together some ingredients that they thought might change the whiskey for the better, and the magical ingredients that they chose were vanilla extract. Now, they chose vanilla extract because, like vanilla beans, oak contains vanillin, and aging bourbon in oak, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, it extracts that vanillin into the whiskey. So, vanilla extract. They also chose liquid smoke, obviously to simulate the charred interior of a barrel. I know that when I've used liquid smoke in something, it really is disappointing. To me, it tastes artificial. I'm not a fan of liquid smoke. Lastly, they used a dry sherry wine, and that they chose to add complex aromas. I can't say that I would even know what sherry wine tastes like. I have no clue. So I'm not sure about sherry wine, but we'll find out. Now, I won't bore you with the math and the measurements they used for the concoctions. It's all science. But suffice it to say, they used very small amounts of each of these ingredients. They mixed it with the 750 milliliter bottles of the cheap whiskey, and they came up with a result. And I know you're dying to know just what was their conclusion at the honorable and prestigious America's Test Kitchen. Well, they claim they did in fact improve cheap bourbon. but just a little bit. What they say is, quote, tasters did not find our doctored bourbon to be as enjoyable as the good stuff, but they were pleasantly surprised by the enhanced complexity, and to our gratification, unanimously preferred it to the unadulterated $15 sample. So, good news. It made a positive impact. What do you think? I don't know. For me, I guess jiggering around out in the garage with your whiskey just seems foolish. For me, I'm just going to cough up a few extra doll hairs the next time I'm at the liquor store. I mean, for around $20, you can still pick up some terrific whiskey like Evan Williams Bottled in Bond or 100 Proof Very Old Barton. Shh, please don't tell anyone about the 100 Proof Very Old Barton. It'll just be our little secret. So there it is. I just saved you a bunch of time, effort, and dinero, and a recommendation to boot. It's all free advice right here on the Blind Tasting Podcast. You're welcome. Now on to the bonus review of a book this time. Yes, a book review instead of liquor lore. People really do, they still read, it's true, and today it's your lucky day. And this is something I absolutely loved. I've been dying to share this. And whether you like their whiskey or not, I think after you read the book, you will at least develop a level of respect for what they've been doing there since 1795. Now, this book has been out for a while. Actually, it came out in 2012. It was written by and about a whiskey icon and the family he came from. And the book is called Beam Straight Up, The Bold Story of the First Family of Bourbon. It's by Fred Noe and Jim Kokoris. Of course, I listened to it on audio. I didn't read it because, well, that would be silly. But you consume it however you like. You can find it at the library. You can find it on Amazon, Audible, Libby, wherever. Now, I normally don't just read here on the podcast, but in this case, I want to read this real quick synopsis of the book. Bear with me. It's quick. Here we go. Beam Straight Up, The Bold Story of the First Family of Bourbon by Fred Noe and Jim Kokoris is a compelling narrative that offers readers an intimate glimpse into the storied history of the Beam family, whose name is synonymous with American bourbon. Fred Noe, the great-grandson of Jim Beam, son of the great Booker Noe and a seventh-generation master distiller, collaborates with author Jim Kokoris to weave a rich tapestry of tradition, innovation, and personal anecdotes that define the essence of the Beam legacy. Okay, I got to catch my breath. There's a lot in there, but that is a really great synopsis of what the book is about. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, though. The book is structured kind of like a memoir, where Fred Noe recounts his experiences growing up, in a family where bourbon was not just a business, but it was really a way of life. He used funny stories. He told some lessons he learned, and he's really candid about his life. And he does have a brief discussion about Freddie. Folks, Fred was a wild child. I'm not going to give anything away here by saying that, but he admits to being absolutely crazy. He acted the fool a lot as a young man. Luckily, and you'll find out in the book, he did have cases and cases of Jim Beam to smooth over, a lot of his shenanigans. Let's just suffice it to say he needed a lot of Jim Beam. Might be fun to ask him about some of those crazy days if you bump into him at the distillery, or maybe not. Now, what I especially enjoyed was some of the stories he told. He tells a hilarious story about one time he unwittingly visited the Playboy Mansion and ended up hanging out with Hugh Hefner. And he also tells of the strong bond that he and his dad Booker eventually developed, and that's a really interesting story. Fred refers to Booker, his dad, as an American original. It seems that Booker said exactly what he wanted to say, drank and ate what he wanted, and he was, according to Fred, quote, Kentucky bourbon and Beam through and through, uncut and unfiltered. Now, I suppose that's a pretty terrific way to describe both Booker himself and the Booker's bourbon we've all come to love. Now, the book gets a bit emotional at times, especially when Fred tells the heartbreaking story of when Booker got a horrible health diagnosis. Booker deals with it in a way that really only a tough old man from that generation would. It's really hard to fathom how he handled it, actually, and I'm going to leave it at that. So the writing style, to me, is what you'd call approachable. What that means is simple folks like me can get into it. You don't need a PhD to really enjoy the book. Even if you don't read a lot, I still think you'll love the book. For people like me who also get distracted and bored easily, I think you'll love it too. I highly recommend it. And in honor of Freddie and Fred and Booker, I'm still enjoying a terrific pour of Little Book Chapter 7. Cheers to everything Jim Beam. Well, maybe not Red Stag. Yeah, definitely not Red Stag. Now, and I got to tell you, I've been so excited about sharing this. I want to take a long, hard look into the massive new Garrard County Distilling Company in Lancaster, Kentucky. It's about 30 miles south of Lexington, and in relation to Bardstown, which is, as we know, is the epicenter of bourbon whiskey, it'd be about 55 miles southeast of Bardstown. Now, full disclosure here, kids, I'm especially partial to Garrard County, Kentucky, because my beautiful wife was born and raised there, just 10 minutes from where the shiny new distillery sits. Actually, her family's been in Garrard County for over 200 years, if I remember correctly. So you'll have to forgive me if I get stupid excited about this new distillery. Okay, class, let's have some fun. Quick lesson on how to pronounce Garrard County and the city of Lancaster. Garrard County has been around since 1796, so the folks that live there know just how to say it. But outsiders and newcomers, not so much. Anyway, Garrard County. It's spelled like Gerard County. It is pronounced Garrard County. It's not Gerald, Gary D, or Geraldo. It's Garrard County. Now, Lancaster. It's spelled like Lancaster. It's not Burt Lancaster or Lenny Kravitz or Telecaster. You pronounce it Lancaster. So say it with me. Garrard and Lancaster. Very good. Believe me, the people of Garrard County and Lancaster are really awesome folks. Let's try our best to say it right. It'll make you feel right at home if you do. Class dismissed. Listen, I'm just having fun here, guys. I'm so stupid giddy that a major distillery will now be basically in my in-laws' backyard. So hopefully you can understand my perspective on this. So Garrard County Distilling is owned by Staghorn out of Atlanta. Was founded by a guy named Ray Franklin in 2018. This will be their first distillery. Now, the way they went about branding of their whiskey is pretty cool. So far, they offer something called All Nations Whiskey. And according to Mr. Franklin, it was really kind of an accidental brand that they stumbled into. The story goes like this. While they were looking for a site for the new distillery, the history of the county came up with some locals. Now, this history lesson included the story of Carrie Nation. I don't know if any of you know, but Carrie Nation was a radical temperance leader. She's best known for storming into saloons and taverns across the country and tearing the crap out of them with her infamous hatchet. They sometimes called her Hatchet Granny, and she really hated liquor. The All Nations brand of whiskey pays homage to Carrie, and the signs that saloon keepers would often hang up that said something to the effect of, "All nations welcome, except Carrie." Now, her birthplace home was located in Garrard County, and so they moved her home. They actually physically moved the house to the distillery property as kind of a joke. And I can't say enough about how much I love this marketing idea. It's really brilliant. I mean, it's a shtick, but with legitimacy. And the irony of putting Carrie Nation's house on the grounds of one of the largest new distilleries in America, well, that's just precious. Okay, you may have noticed I'm not easily impressed. Yeah, you think? Well, Garrard County Distilling is already quite impressive, and here are the stats to back it up. I've got a stat sheet they sent me here. I'm going to give you just the most notable parts about it. We're not going to read it. We're going to hit the high points. So the distillery is huge. It sits on 210 acres, so they have plenty of room to grow. They set up two 45-foot tall, 36-inch Vendome column stills. So they're ready to rock. They're ready to produce a lot of distillate. I think that's something they're extremely proud of, having the foresight to build a facility that can produce huge amounts of distillate rather than starting small and then retrofitting as they grow. So it's very thoughtful, and really it's very cost effective too. They currently have the capacity to lay down 150,000 barrels a year. Now let's put this in perspective. Somebody like Jim Beam produces over 500,000 barrels a year. But Beam has been around for a very long time. 150,000 barrels a year right out the gate, that's freaking impressive. They're going to start with 2 rickhouses capable of holding 25,000 barrels each. But they do have plans to expand the number of rickhouses. I think they're going to build 24 by 2030. Now, they've created 60 jobs for the community by building and operating this distillery. And they currently have 17,000 sourced whiskey barrels aging on site. And that's in addition to they've laid down 15,000 barrels themselves so far of their own distillate. So that's kind of the numbers. That's kind of the stat sheet on what they've got going on. Now, Franklin admits he didn't single-handedly, set this place up. Garrard County Distilling has gotten a lot of help. It's a massive distillery. It's quite an undertaking. Now, I know I've mentioned before how willing all these whiskey guys and gals are to give a helping hand to their whiskey-making neighbors. I mentioned that in a previous episode. This was really no exception in this instance. The good folks at Wilderness Trail helped Garrard County Distilling quite a bit during setup of the new operation. And if I'm not mistaken, for now, until they get some aged whiskey, what they're bottling is actually from Wilderness Trail. If you dig into the mash bill for All Nations bourbon, it's 64 corn, 24 rye, and 12% malted barley. And everything that I know points to Wilderness Trail liquid. In my opinion, and that's just my opinion, I haven't seen that officially, and I didn't get anything from Garrard County Distilling to corroborate that. But to me, all signs point to Wilderness Trail distillate for now. Which, by the way, is fantastic whiskey. I've had their bourbon, I've had their rye, in several different iterations, and they're phenomenal. So that's good stuff. And keep in mind, Wilderness Trail Distillery is only 12 miles away from Garrard County Distilling. So it really makes sense that they would be the source for All Nations, at least for a while. I remember in years past when we would visit the in-laws, we'd stop by Wilderness Trail Distillery, and that was before they were offering any whiskey. And at that time, they only had vodka that was oddly unfiltered, which I actually liked quite a bit. I don't know how many others liked it, but I loved it. I think maybe at the time they also had rum, but I never tried their rum. The vodka was cheap, so I would grab several bottles and bring them home. Now here's a fun fact. Wilderness Trail released their first bourbon whiskey in 2018. And to me, that's impressive. And kind of hard to believe with the amount of visibility and prestige they've gotten already, even to the point that Campari is acquiring them. So again, to me, it's cool. They're helping Franklin at Garrard County Distilling get started. So back to All Nations. Can you get your hands on All Nations whiskey right now? And the short answer is yes. But there are some bottles of All Nations out there in various forms. But I'm super excited about the future of All Nations, and so are they. I'm not going to lie, this is the tricky piece of this puzzle. It was hard for me to piece this together. Unfortunately, not too many states have any of their new stuff yet. According to Franklin, their soft launch was last month, but that was only for Georgia and Kentucky. But they will be adding several more states in coming months. They're calling it a relaunch of their All Nations straight bourbon whiskey, and that'll be next month, which is August of 2024. And that's according to their public relations folks that I contacted. They hope to be in 35 states by December of next year, but no mention as to exactly which states, though. I didn't get that information. I guess just hang on, folks. You'll get your shot at whatever the latest iteration of All Nations is very soon. And when I get back to visit the in-laws in Lancaster, I plan on taking a tour and hitting the visitor center to pick up some All Nations for myself. And when I get my hands on some, I might just maybe review it here on the podcast. So big shout out to Garrard County Distilling. I reached out to them, and I got to say, they responded very quickly with information and photos of the new facility. I'm going to post them for all you whiskey freaks to see on the socials. Please take a look at the socials after you finish listening to this episode. And now the money spot. Are you maybe looking to update your bar or man cave with some great photographs or wall art? head over to Etsy at famousdocs.etsy.com and pick up some fantastic prohibition, bourbon, whiskey, and gangster-related photographs and art. And if you purchase 4 or more items, you'll get 20% off your entire order for a limited time. That's famousdocs.etsy.com. famousdocs.etsy.com. And now, my review of Traveler whiskey. So I picked up my bottle of Traveler for $34.99 here in the St. Louis area. And I got it really right when it came out. I was pretty excited about it. It's a blended whiskey at 90 proof. God only knows what's really in there. I don't even want to go into all of that. Its distillery is Buffalo Trace. There's no age statement. The bottle design, it's pretty basic. It's similar in shape to Old Forester to me, but without that skirt at the bottom, if that makes sense. Look at a bottle of Old Forester, pretend it doesn't have that thing at the bottom. The color of the whiskey, technically I called it Old Gold, or about 0.6 on the official scale. Some others have called it light gold, which in my opinion is extremely generous. Whatever, it's very light yellow in color. And I've said it a million times, you can tell a lot about the level of joy you're about to put in your mouth based on the color. Not always, but in my opinion, there is a strong correlation in most tastings I've done. So that's worth saying yet again. So the fine folks at Buffalo Trace say, quote, and you got to listen to this, folks. In pursuit of the finest possible whiskey, over 50 blends were sampled before making blend number 40 the chosen combination. Blend number 40 is the carefully created result of countless hours and testing and tasting and is exactly what you'd expect. A premium whiskey that speaks for itself. So you mean to tell me, after what was probably hours or maybe even days of tasting, they landed on this one? You can't see me, but I'm shaking my head. Now, I do understand that Mr. Stapleton has helped pick some whiskey in the past. He's worked with Buffalo Trace, and he handpicked some barrels of E.H. Taylor back in 2021, again in 2022. The proceeds from the barrels went to Chris Stapleton's charity, which is fantastic. He does great work. And don't get me wrong, I love Chris Stapleton. I think Chris is an amazing humanitarian, in addition to a phenomenal musician. He's from Kentucky, so that should make this whole new whiskey of his extra cool. I love Buffalo Trace. Buffalo Trace, they create some of the finest whiskeys in the world. I guess what I'm saying is that Chris and Buffalo Trace are both equally amazing artists, both in music and the whiskey industry. I mean, is anybody ever going to say that Chris doesn't deserve his 10, count them 10 freaking Grammys? Anyone ever going to get pissed about Weller 12, Eagle Rare, or Blanton's? Exactly. So why do I have such a long face when it comes to Traveler whiskey? I'm going to give you 3 good reasons. Ready, set, and number 1. The taste. It just lacks any depth. Number 2. The taste. It lacks any complexity. Number 3. The taste. There is very little flavor. And what really worries me, what really grabs me by the begonias about Traveler whiskey, is that a newbie might get a hold of a bottle and actually try to drink it. Big mistake. You do not want Traveler, in my opinion, to be your introduction to whiskey. Guys, it saddens me to say these words, but I have to speak the truth here. Remember, this is a no BS zone. The truth must be spoken. Listen, friends, I adore Mr. Wheatley at Buffalo Trace, and I admire Freddie Johnson so much. I've been to the distillery, I guess I've been to the distillery 7 or 8 times. I'm tore up over this stuff. Yeah, I bought it. Yeah, I tasted it on 4 different occasions. And it just kills me to break my own rule today of not doing a reasonably thorough review here on the Blind Tasting Podcast. But I will not taste it again. Just not happening. Sorry. I hope you can forgive me. So what's the verdict? Well, you probably can figure this out all by your lonesome, right? As you all know, there are 3 possible verdicts at the Blind Tasting Podcast. Are we going to keep it, collect it, or cull it? As you know, keep it means proudly display it in your liquor cabinet or bar. Stuff is good for a pour anytime, so no need to stock up. It's always available. Collect it. Grab another bottle or 2 since you find it so darn delicious, or it just may not be easy to obtain. And the last option is cull it. Pass it on to an annoying neighbor, or use it to preserve specimens in your laboratory. Now, if you read the back of the bottle of Traveler, the very last line in the text says, "It's a premium whiskey that speaks for itself." Well, I'm not sure exactly what this whiskey is saying, but I'll speak for it. And the only words that come to my mind are cull it. Listen, I hate when people use the term drain pour, because I've never before come across a whiskey that I thought deserved being dumped into the drain. But I guess there's a first time for everything. I really think part of the problem for me is I think I had my expectations too high. I think about Heaven's Door or even Peyton Manning's Sweetens Cove. And, those whiskeys, they hold their own. They're decent pours. So a part of this is my fault. I love country music. I love Chris in so many ways. But I got to take out the emotion, folks. I got to use just the facts. And that leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth, literally. Now, should you listen to Chris Stapleton's music? Hell yeah. He really is amazing. Should you go to Buffalo Trace Distillery? Hell yeah. Should you buy lots of Eagle Rare or Blanton's or Taylor? Yes. Support them. They usually do amazing things. I hope the future will be bright. I hope we'll continue to see amazing stuff from Buffalo Trace. I look forward to enjoying more great whiskey from Buffalo Trace. Just not this one. That's it. This is my opinion, and my opinion only. And that concludes my review of Traveler. Last but not least, I got to give a big shout out to the farmers, distillery production guys and gals, warehouse workers, bottlers, and truck drivers. They make it happen. So cheers to all of them. Well, that's all I got for today, Whiskey Freaks. Thanks for listening to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your #1 attitudinal bourbon destination.